Imagine for a moment buildings that are actually alive, that are growing themselves like plants grow, that are flowering like mushrooms flower, that are producing energy like algae produces energy. The materials themselves are actually shifting and changing with time, that are adjusting and adapting to the ecosystems around, and they're fueling the growth of the rest of the building. Now, this is the vision of Dreaming Earth, an incubator that is helping startups create the regenerative materials that make this possible, and also the living building systems that make this possible. Now, you may wonder if these buildings sound super cool to live inside, and they're beautiful and organic and natural, and if they're benefiting all of planet Earth because they're able to decompose over time and they're completely sustainable, why haven't we been able to do this yet? Why haven't we been able to grow a building like a plant? Well, the answer is in the way buildings are designed, the system that is set up. So in every city, there is a Department of Buildings. In the United States, there is a code, which is the regulations to provide safety for the people in the building. And that's what's holding up the entire system. Is if there's going to be a hurricane, if there's going to be massive snow, if there's going to be a massive rainstorm, if there's going to be hundreds of people inside of this building, is it structurally sound for all of those things to happen? So it's a good thing these regulations are in place, keeps us all safe, right? The second piece of that is the fire code, which says how many hours do people have to get out of the building if this building catches fire? And that determines what kind of materials are used in the construction and where the walls are, and many different factors. So the design of buildings has been focused on meeting these codes, which have nothing to do with growing a building, because how do you measure the structural stability and the fire capacity of a building that is growing and changing and transmuting over time? So what's beautiful is now we have the technology to do those things. We have sensors that we can adapt to architecture to measure the moment by moment structural capacity of the things that we're walking on and the walls that are holding up the ceiling. We have also AI that can measure all of those nodes, the Internet of Things, that can model how is the overall structural capacity of this building changing with all of these different sensors. And these sensors could also be detecting what is the potential for fire and giving people a warning to take a look at something. We might even, instead of allowing the building to burn down, there might be something that shifts and changes the way the building grows as a fire threat comes into being. Something might happen. So these are new tools that we have available. And so architecture is going to shift and grow and change. And instead of having static regulations, this is the vision of Dreaming Earth, that instead of having static determination of what a building is, that we actually can have a moment by moment determination of the safety of the building, so that we can grow buildings and live in things that feel more like trees than like solid steel structures all the time. Now, it's a choice. We can produce both. We have the opportunity to mix and match and to blend these things together. And isn't it wonderful to have these choices? And here's the deal. The building and construction industry represents a massive market to be disrupted. We have been operating the same way in this market for a long time. And there is a $6 trillion building construction market that's growing to at least $14.4 trillion by 2030. And inside of that, the building material market is about $1.3 trillion. Now, regenerative materials are a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction, and they represent the biggest potential for market growth. So this is the vision of Dreaming Earth, that we are growing buildings, literally. Visionaries who are looking at how does biology grow and shift and adapt, and how do we create materials that actually adapt. So you're in the middle of a hailstorm and your building gets dinged and it regrows itself. Many different examples, living materials. And we can start with materials that can be decomposed. So tiles that are made out of kelp or seaweed. And so the idea is not only these living materials that regenerate themselves, insulations made of mushrooms, those sorts of things, but also the systems with which we build them. Things like using robotics to weave the same way that indigenous people would weave a bridge when they were nomadic to cross to get to the other side of a canyon, using a robotic technique to weave a building into place and to use the sensors to measure, is it still structurally sound, and maybe send those robots back in to reweave that area. So not only are we talking about materials that regenerate themselves, but we're talking about entire systems that are growing, adapting to the elements around. And so using the best of indigenous wisdom about regenerative materials and sustainable harvest, and mixing it with the best of technology that's coming our way as well. This is the vision of Dreaming Earth. And I'm curious, post in the comments below your vision for what the Earth looks like in 2042. What do cities look like? What do buildings look like? How do they behave? How do people feel inside of them? What is the nature of architecture in 2042? Post in the comments below.